We might be doing a budget. Throw that out.
I don't think the committee will be ready.
You know, you never know who's watching online. You know, somebody messaged me afterwards. It says, I was watching that. Thanks for looking out for this. We're all online.
Yeah.
Look at this behind me too. I'm like, what are you looking at? So,
Sure.
oh,
So I have on YouTube. There are pictures.
that one's not
And they're on
connected.
my, yeah, and then I can have music and pretty pictures on my TV.
Take track changes on, so you can see what's actually changed. That's the new contracting. Anytime you send a document out with changes, track changes.
Going to Orlando on Sunday.
Oh,
Fun or work?
Bali or, no.
I don't know yet. That one's still up in the air.
Yeah, I'm
The
sure.
work.
you would go.
Yeah, well, Orlando's work, and then I turn around and I go Sunday to Sunday. I land at 9:30, turn around and jump on another plane at 11:55 to go back to
We
Tampa.
are, and then Steve just came in, he's gonna look at the
You're on
second
camera.
TV.
So just be aware, we're going live here in a couple of seconds, but I seen the green lights on above you. That means you're hearing everything you're saying.
All right.
It'll be nice out there.
Yes. Yes, it will.
Okay. Ready? Perfect. Okay. I want to welcome everybody out. This is the Roy City Council special work session for January 24th, 2023. Time is 5 o'clock. I want to welcome everybody and I'll do a roll call. I want to recognize the fact is that we have Councilmember Wilson, Councilmember Joe Paul, Councilmember Saxton, and Councilmember Sophie Paul here with us tonight. Bob,
I think we replaced Saxton about a year ago with Skadden.
oh, I'm sorry. What did I say?
Saxton.
Saxton, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Skadden. I'm sorry. And Jackson will not be joining us tonight, okay? Tonight's conversation is specifically focused on the 2023 general plan with emphasis on the moderate income housing plan or report component to that. But we're going to look at all of the pieces associated with the general plan. So with that, we'll turn the time over to Steve and kind of guide us through this conversation.
Hey. So I'm gonna kind of go through it this same way. For some odd reason, my computer's being slow. What you see is not what I see. There we go. Similar to what we did with the general plan last year. So if you send in comments, I put it together on that particular sheet, your comment, and then I will turn the time over to you to explain your thoughts, your concerns, or what have you. So that way we just kind of go slide to slide and through. We don't jump ahead, jump around, but we kind of go through it. So just to let you know, all the mayor's comments are in blue. Councilmember Wilson's is in orange, Jackson's in green, Joe Paul's is in purple, Sophie Paul's in gray, and Skadden's in a mustard. Okay, so on page 30 is kind of where we're starting. Diane, you kind of had some concerns on this portion of it. So I'll turn some time over to you.
All right. I just wanted a bit of a clarification. There's one place that here on page 30, and then one place I think it's like around 110, it talks about the city has created 2 new CRAs, and one place it says we've begun to do 2 or 3 new CRAs. And so my understanding is we have 2 new CRAs now, right? And they're in place, is that correct?
We have 3, so
So
2
3 new ones.
downtown, 1 front runner station, and then 2 old ones who sunset next couple years.
Okay, so I was just thinking we could, just the way it's written, it maybe isn't quite as, just kind of reword the paragraph because of the way it talks about those and let me just see.
Well, look, for clarification purpose, while she's looking at that, we have 2 RDA projects,
Mhm.
okay, but we only have 3 CRA projects. So we got to make sure there's a distinction between whether the RDA, which was way back 18 years ago or however long that was, and then the creation of 3 new CRAs. Okay, go ahead, Diane.
Because as it talks about the 2 RDA projects and says these projects will both expire in the next decade, this is by creating additional projects. Well, we have created some additional, so I'm wondering, when they're talking about by creating additional projects, are we talking about, this is kind of the old wording from the last draft. And then they say, well, we have created 2 new CRAs, but have we created 2 new CRAs or 3 new CRAs? And instead of saying by creating additional project areas, is that conflicting or am I misunderstanding the way it's saying? And so I had just suggested rewording that. For me, it seemed to clarify it better for my rewording.
Well, kind of like the mayor said, I think this verse is separating the old RDAs and then
Mhm.
keeping CRAs kind of a little bit farther down in the paragraph. The in between where it says, these projects will expire by creating additional project areas. The redevelopment agency may negotiate tax entities. So it's kind of saying what you'll be able to do if you create new ones. And then the last sentence, it says the city created 2 new community CRAs for downtown area in 2019 and a 3rd for front runner station area in 2022. So it's kind of keeping little, your paragraph that you kind of put in really says the same thing. It's just the one that's written there just kind of keeps them separate so they're not melanged together.
So does that mean that we are proposing to create additional RDA areas by creating additional project areas, the redevelopment agency may negotiate with taxing entities? Talking about these particular ones that we just did, this is just saying in future, if we did even more than what we already have.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Does that work for you?
Mhm.
Okay, then the takeaway would be, are you okay, Diane, with what he got in there already? With that clarification, or do you want to
Yes.
change the words?
No, I think that sounds,
Okay. Page 31.
The next one is page 31. Again, Diane, you kind of had some questions. Just to clarify, we didn't get all the way into it last meeting on what the modern income housing report would done. I had mentioned that we were going to get rid of the strategy O, which was to apply for funds from 3 or 4 different agencies in order to look for ways to get modern income housing. So with removing that one, I think the consultant said, okay, well, how else can we get those funding? I know some of the bigger cities have line items in their general fund to help, buy an old home that's dilapidated, fix it up, and then sell it as a low income housing. They can do a deed restriction and stuff like that. So this one kind of put in, said, okay, let's maybe have the general fund look at having a part of your funding, but also CDBG is out there. There's other resources we can get without hog tying us down to every year have to apply. It doesn't mean that the general fund, if all of a sudden Matt puts it together and it doesn't balance with that line item in it, it doesn't say you can't take it out, but this is just suggesting maybe in the future we look at the city taking some progressive or step forward of helping some of these homes to be rehabilitated.
can you So give me a little more specific example of what this general, how we would use this general fund then, please.
Well, well, Matt might have a better idea. I know in Ogden, they have a neighborhood development division under community development, and all their sole job is to look for homes that they can purchase, rehab, and sell. In some cases, they buy blocks. Well, I shouldn't say blocks.
Yeah.
I see that,
Yeah.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
The city does.
The city does.
City
And
does.
Yes.
The city
then they
owns
turn
those
around
houses.
and sell
And then they
it.
turn around and sell them,
And they turn
profit.
around and sell.
Most of them are low to moderate income housing, but they put a deed restriction on it. So say I sell it to you and your family, in 10 years you sell it, it can only be purchased by someone who still meets the low income housing. So you're not gonna make millions of dollars off of it.
I find myself not feeling that the general fund should be even an option for that sort of thing. So for me, I would prefer that the general fund is taken out as an option. I don't believe that's the place for the general fund. So I believe that it should be removed, and I think would still be I feel strongly about that.
Okay,
I don't
council,
know
what
what
do you
other
think?
people feel about, I just don't think we should be in the business of buying homes and selling them and fixing them up. I think that should come to a different, it shouldn't be the city.
Comments?
General
Matt,
fund.
have we ever bought homes and fixed
Um,
them and sold them?
only for our own use, not
Okay.
for the use of others.
Other-
I would think if we were gonna do that, I mean, I would look towards, can the RDA be tied into it
Right.
before I would say the general fund?
Yeah.
I think maybe
The only problem is RDA, I don't know how much that's gonna tie into modern income
Income
housing. But it's part of the general plan. I mean, if we want to buy up a couple of houses, demolish them, and then develop a partnership with a company to,
You can also restrict yourself to the RDA areas.
Yeah.
versus the
Well, I
city
think
as a
about
whole.
those houses up on 1900 where it is. There's a few houses where I'm like, could the city? Absolutely, but
I think.
I would
like,
say
when we're looking
RDA
at-
before I'd say general fund.
When we're looking like at Ogden City and Salt Lake City, the bigger cities, they have entire departments allocated to this kind of stuff. If Roy City ever did something on a very, very small scale, let's say not even buying houses, but have a position, it would have to start within the general fund.
Even if
Because
we
we don't
remove,
employ in the RDA.
sorry, even if we remove the term general fund, we still could use the general fund. This isn't a tie our hand behind the back, the general fund.
And even leaving it in doesn't tie you either.
Right.
That's
But I think the discussion really is, as tight as we operate under the general fund, and we are very, very tight into the general fund.
Mhm.
Is that something you, as a city council, would want to look at or pursue possibly sometime in the future?
I'd do the RDA before I went after.
I mean,
Where's tied
this
to
is
them
like a
frustrating.
make or break deal for me. I was very concerned when I saw that put in there. That was very concerning to me. I mean, we go to a lot of effort on this general fund and trying to divide it up and divvy it up, and now to put it out as something like this, I don't even think it should be suggested personally. And then if some other city council decides that's the direction they're gonna go, well, let them at it. But I would prefer that not to be under
Randy?
mine.
I mean, again, if we're going to take anything out of the general fund, we have to have consensus of 3 on the council. So there is not technically, in my purview, any harm in keeping the term general fund in there. Because again, it still has to pass muster with whoever the city council is at the time, whether it's now, whether it's in the future. I don't see any of us, whilst we're sitting on the council, going and pulling anything out of the general fund.
But do you suggest it for a future council? As soon as you throw it in there, you're suggesting that it's a
But
possibility.
again, this is a 20-year document.
I'm on the fence. You could push me either way.
Yeah,
That's okay.
likewise.
It is a 20-year document, but I think that we're setting the path, we're setting the priorities, and I don't believe that that should be a priority. We're, as Joe just said, we're suggesting something that I don't believe should be suggested. We're the keepers and the take cares of this new general plan that's just being put into place. And I think that's a pretty important principle that just kind of got slipped in there, which actually it's the tip of a big iceberg, I believe. And I don't believe that that tip should even be in there.
Sophie?
I'm either way.
Yeah.
Yeah, the general, I don't like, I wouldn't put anything else in it, but the word general fund I don't want us in the housing business, buying and selling. But
Could it change the,
By your token, by the wording in here, it
We're in
is
the
your
business.
long-range plan.
So, okay, so when we turn around, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. But if we take and send something out, I know you will. If we take and send something out for bond, right? If we bond, doesn't those funds come into the general fund? Okay,
Yeah.
so let me take it one step further. What if we said, we want to acquire a large set of property along 1900 at some particular point in the future? We're going to put it on the ballot to potentially bond for it. We just basically pigeonhole ourselves into not having that power and flexibility by taking the verbiage out, correct?
Not necessarily.
Well,
No, because you can do anything as long as you have 3 council members vote. So
True.
regardless of what the
Whether it's
verbiage
there.
is right there. My
Yeah.
only concern is just suggesting it may open up future councils to say, hey, that's what their plan was, is we're gonna fund it out of the general
No
fund.
fund. Yeah. And I can see that, yeah.
keeping most of it in, just say it is essential to draw upon the existing
Existing
resources,
resources.
not say general fund or.
Yeah.
That's what I would-
That, yeah,
I
I would
like-
be fine with that.
I like
Because
that
that
verbiage.
gives you the ability, again, that they would have to come and be creative and say, hey, bond, hey.
What's the existing resource? Yeah,
Right.
it could be RDA,
RDA.
general funds, a
Bond.
bond. Yeah, I like
So
that.
Just-
Yes.
how would you word that then?
Well, it's really just changing, trying to get rid of general funds, so it is essential to draw upon existing resources of the community and reallocating some of these resources to promote affordable housing.
And when you're saying
General
it
sales
is essential, and then that way you're changing it.
Just a
So for anything.
Broad, general
Mhm.
comment versus very specific fund.
I like that
And the
better.
reason why
I like
that's,
that better.
this is an important conversation is, remember, this has not been changed for 21, 22 years. It has been the Bible in terms of how we govern. And technically, according to the law, you can't do any land use changes, okay, unless it's conformance with this policy. Now, you can certainly change the general plan.
Right.
And any council can, but this is the guidance, this is the direction, and it could very well be the guidance and direction for the next 20 years. So if you're comfortable with the idea of removing the term general plan out of the conversation, then I think Steve could make that adjustment and allow it then just look at all sources if there's a consideration to use affordable housing or want to develop affordable housing and let them choose whoever decides to do that. But we take the general fund comment out. Everybody okay with that?
Yes, I want to just clarify on the sentence that says this could include earmarked sales tax or other revenue to provide development subsidies for deed restricted affordable housing. What are we talking about? This could include earmarked sales tax. Isn't that general fund? Because that whole sentence right there is referring to the general fund.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it would seem to me that second sentence that's crossed out would strike out that second sentence as well.
Okay, because.
Yeah, so
So
essentially,
you say what it would be then?
it would read where it says pass through, it would say it is essential to draw upon existing resources of the community and reallocating some of these resources to promote affordable housing.
Uh-huh.
And then that,
Strike
the
out the
rest of
remaining.
that
Okay.
sentence would be gone, and then it would go with the CBG funds
Okay.
made, da, 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 da.
Thank you. I feel much better about that.
You okay with that,
Yep.
Steve?
Yep.
Okay. Everybody okay? Yep. Okay. Let's go to preserving housing stock.
Hey, so Diane, you kind of also had this question on the city should set aside a goal to rehabilitate the number of houses, including or housing units before the year 2025.
So could you just discuss what is being referred, whether that's you or the magic people, they who wrote this, maybe it's Sam or somebody. This is a new paragraph again. And our goal is to rehabilitate a number of housing units before the year 2025. Just like, what does that mean? If that's our goal, or does that mean we're trying to promote people to change their homes, to update them? Does that mean we're trying to promote them to sell it so we can have high density in redevelopment areas?
Could
Maybe
we not
can
already
explain
tick this box with what we did with accessory dwelling units?
You can, again, it's just, And I'm sorry, I didn't realize that they had added so much to this, but it's, to me, it's just, does the city want to set a goal to have so many homes being rehabilitated? Now granted, the year could change, by 2030, or strike the sentence out. I don't
I
think it
think
really,
The Senate should
but
be
it's
strict.
one of those, we as a city should, in my opinion, be more progressive of, trying to make it so we do keep our low-income housing stock. So it doesn't get sold to big developers who want, lots of homes on it where it could still remain as a single-family home. But
But I'm just not sure the city should be, we could encourage it, but I'm, and in other ways, but I'm not sure we're the ones that should be rehabilitating and I guess you could read this in a way that says we're not the ones, but it says the city should set a goal to rehabilitate. The city should rehabilitate a number of housing units. And I believe that that same thing can be done and will be done, but I believe that sentence should not be there.
the next sentence, there are various programs available to the city to assist in home rehabilitation efforts.
Yeah. If we're talking about us assisting other, people like as in guiding them, but for us to be the ones they're doing it, I don't believe we should be. There are various programs available. I think that you could say there are various programs available to help with home rehabilitations, but I don't think we should be helping the city to assist it.
Mhm.
I'm not for or against it. I'm just,
There are various programs available to assist with home rehabilitation efforts.
Take the city
That puts
comment
on the
out.
city.
I think we
help
can
them.
strike it out and it still makes sense.
Yeah.
Or
To
leave
the
it in and
city.
it still.
Yeah, and then not put a timeline of
Available
it.
to
Right.
assist
Yeah.
with home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not the city.
So yeah, so
City.
strike the first the first underlined sentence.
The underline,
And
and
the
then on
city.
the next sentence, we're just gonna take out the city.
Uh-huh.
To this, yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You okay with that? Okay. So, okay, Steve, you got what you're looking for on that one?
Okay. Yes, and
We're still on page 31?
Okay, on the mixed use, just out of curiosity, where it says, right under mixed use, it says the Roy zoning ordinance could be changed. I was thinking we should probably say has been changed to allowed, because I believe that that's just
Well-
a typo area, right?
no, because if you look at the sentence, the zoning ordinance could be changed to allow for specific types of residential dwellings in commercial zones. Right now, we just allow it on top of commercial. I think this is suggesting for future that maybe look for opportunities as well, to have just townhomes or apartments in the commercial zone.
You're saying changing the zone.
But I
completely?
think your point also, when I read it was, and I highlighted it, this is, the downtown is not the only commercial zone.
Right.
So technically, you could look at other residential dwelling options within the other commercial zones. You can include the entire metric.
Okay.
So my interpretation was, is you were reaching for not just downtown, who's already been changed, but literally all commercials could be considered if there was an option for some residential.
Because this would go with strategy A in the moderate income housing.
Mixed use, okay?
Yeah.
And do we give ourselves enough credit? Because right now when it says could be, it almost sounds like we're not giving ourselves credit. So maybe what we could do is we could say the zoning ordinance has been changed and could be changed, could be further changed. And maybe we don't need to give ourselves credit for that because, but it sounds to me like somewhere along the line, when you're looking at these rules and regulations, we're supposed to be taking credit for some of the things we've already done. And I don't know if that is necessary or
I
not.
mean, we can put it in, it just, it's more of a pat on the back, but 10 years from now, they're gonna look at it going,
Yeah, I don't believe it's for them. I believe this is for the DWS that's looking at.
this is
stuff.
not.
So there, that doesn't, okay.
No, they don't look at the general, they just look at the moderate income housing portion of the
Yeah.
whole general
Okay.
plan.
But I think to Diane's point, I think what she's saying is if I was a reader reading through this, then I read the mixed use, it may leave the individual with the assumption is that there's not already a mixed use ordinance
Mhm.
and that Roy zoning could be allow mixed use ordinance. And I think her comment would be is simply identify in that statement that we've already done part of it, but there could very well be others that could be considered. And I think just the comment that would be is something to do with could be more like the fact we've done some and certainly others could be available.
I think it
What if the
clarifies it.
changed could be
Yeah,
moved to expanded?
could be expanded to allow other
Yeah.
specific
Okay, because
areas.
then it
The
would
Roy
suggest
zoning
that it was
ordinance
already
has
in
been
place.
changed to allow for specific types of residential dwellings and commercial zones and could be expanded. Just add could be expanded at the end of that first sentence.
Yeah. That might do it.
Okay, and then change could be to has been. Okay,
Council,
Roy's zoning
Randy, comment?
ordinance has,
Ron, just under mixed use.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Joe?
I'm not fast.
so can you repeat that sentence, Diane?
Yeah.
the Roy zoning ordinance has been changed to allow for specific types of residential dwellings in commercial zones and could be expanded.
Residential.
Can we say could be expanded to additional areas
Okay,
in the city?
the next paragraph.
Let me
just
make
as-
sure we're
oh,
okay
go
with
ahead.
this.
Mhm.
Okay, got three. Okay, go ahead.
The next paragraph, that's just a typo, and I'll get with you on the typos that.
Yeah, any typos you see,
Oh, we
the
can do
problem
that.
is, they had it, this was all in a program called InDesign. And I looked to get it and it was $300 a month. And I said, I'll probably use it once, so I don't want it. So they had to convert it to a Word document, and I don't think it recognized everything.
All the changes.
If it was converted to a PDF, then it would have been fine, but I needed a Word document so I could even add in the modern income housing stuff.
Sure.
So
Right.
some of that, but yeah, if you have stuff, and I'll try to go through it before we make it official and post it on there. But yeah, those type of things I can correct at any time when we see them.
I think Diane's got a pretty good list.
I've got
to give
those,
to
and I'll
you.
get those to you later.
Okay.
And so if we, so for example, like that next paragraph, form-based. Let's see. Well, we can talk about that later. Now, if you go to the bottom paragraph, increased densities in selected zones. Actually, this was, I felt, a fairly derogatory sentence to us as a city. And I mean, it says currently a height restriction of 35 feet exists for multifamily. Anyway, I believe that, and it wasn't accurate, 18 to 24, could be 18 to 25. I just felt that we could say, as was in the stuff that's written there, currently building heights are 60 to 80 feet for multifamily units in the transit-oriented and downtown districts. Stationary has been zoned to increased densities of 18 to 25 units per acre, and downtown area zoning now has unlimited units per acre. I believe that that's accurate, and I believe that that's more positive. This was somewhat derogatory, and we were just talking about what we've done.
Well, this one was more specific to the two zones mentioned, R3 and R4, not the mixed use zones, because those are mixed use zones, not multifamily zones. So this one was increased densities in selected zones, and this one, this paragraph pinpointed R3 and R4.
So
There
then
are
why-
restrictions on height of 35 feet
Yeah,
unless you are in chapter 11 of zoning code, subsection 9, it does allow for it to go up to 60 if it's transit-oriented district or for public purpose project. So it allows to go taller if you can prove it's one of those two projects. But then it's restricting that it's only 12 units per acre. So that's what this paragraph is basically saying, those two zones do have the capability of increasing densities to possibly 18 to 24, not necessarily the mixed use zones that already have done that.
Interesting comment.
I believe that we can still say the same thing in a more positive and less derogatory way. And, because we can move forward if we want to. We just said we can change that and enhance it in other zone areas, so. I'd like to work on the wording of that because I just believe that it's been written in a derogatory way and doesn't acknowledge what has been done already. I mean, you're already referring to transit oriented and
Well,
that currently, I just think that it could be written
these,
differently.
again, it's referring to the two sections of the code in red there. 10.10.24 gives you the height restrictions and the number of
Mhm.
units restrictions. 10.11.9C gives you options to increase height if you are part of a transit-oriented development or for a public purpose. So say we bought some homes and wanted more density, we could,
Yes, we could.
but and the zoning ordinance already states this. So this is just hate to say it, regurgitating the same verbiage, just saying there are opportunities in two other zones that we could make it allow for more density,
Then
more
maybe-
modern
and then
income
maybe you
housing.
could just say that R3 and R4, just add that at the end, R3 and R4 zones could be considered for similar changes.
Might work.
To what you've written and include that,
Mhm.
or?
Yeah, have that the new paragraph and then just say, if you want to add R3 and R4, just say R3 and R4 zones could be added for, could be additional.
Okay, Randy, comment.
Yes, I guess, as I say, I don't see any harm in doing that.
Okay, Joe,
I'm good.
Sophie?
Yeah, no, good.
Okay, so let's do this. Diane, you just volunteered.
Yep.
Sit down with Steve and between the two of you, kind of structure that response, okay?
Sounds good.
You guys okay with that?
Is it that
Steve?
red paragraph on the side then? Is that what you're looking at?
Well, mine is
And
just
then we'd add
referring to
in.
the zoning code that has
Keep
those
it orange.
restrictions to it.
It's the orange. Yeah,
Okay.
The orange is
Okay.
her.
I need to have this done soon, Diane, so,
we can do it tonight.
okay, so after the meeting,
We'll go
if you
ahead.
guys
How
will,
late we are.
I mean, when you send this out to us, I mean, can you enable track changes so we can see what was changed?
Again, this is in a PowerPoint.
yeah. But remember, you're gonna have one more shot at this. in
Can
the
you
vote.
highlight it? In a PowerPoint, just highlight.
I mean, I could resend the general plan, once we've kind of figure it all out and try to
The problem I
highlight.
run into is when you're taking big documents like this and you're trying to compare what was changed versus what wasn't. I guess I've moved into a new realm of contracting, and so
Maybe we can just create a separate document that says on page 34.
Yeah. This is what it was, here's the new.
a quick
This is what it
reference
was.
sheet of this is what we,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to
That's
trade
probably
more
easier than
work.
trying, I've talked to Steve when the formatting kind of went to go on him and.
Well, yeah, I mean,
So we gotta
anytime
be
I take a
careful with
PDF
that,
and
yeah.
convert it to a Word document, I run the risk
If
of,
we could just
translation
say,
being
like,
lost.
this one is on page 31, like, page
Okay.
31 was changed per.
I like that.
yeah.
Page 28, we did this.
Perfect.
And then you guys.
Because then
have-
at least I can look at what the proposed is and what it was and just make sure I'm okay with the wordsmithing.
Before you're ready to vote, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
sounds
good way to
good.
approach it,
Yeah.
just a Word document.
I was just a little concerned with the size of this Word document. I'm surprised it hasn't gone kaput on me already, so.
We already got 2 pages from Diane on that, so I think we're good.
Hers was fine, just the word general.
Yeah,
plan.
you're,
I
yeah.
gotta start dividing it up into chapters.
Mm.
Okay,
Okay.
we're past 31, now to 53.
I was just had a question on the map on page 53. I know that we had removed the catwalks, we just removed catwalks from our junior high.
Yep.
And my understanding is, from my previous notes, was that we were omitting that line at the bottom
Mhm.
on that map, because we weren't wanting to foster the
and
catwalk concept.
There was arrows that pointed to having
Mhm.
pedestrian. I just think he forgot that, so we'll try
Okay.
to me, it's,
Yeah, it's a
anywhere you want to
typo.
improve pedestrian, but I don't think there's ways of doing it in those areas, so that can be removed.
Okay.
Well,
And so then the page 57 is basically the same. I'm just asking, and no, this is just, I'm asking, on page 57, the top says existing pedestrian alley. Is that actually still there?
Yes,
I'm just wondering.
it wasn't
So-
vacated.
It wasn't one that we vacated. It's still there and we're taking care of that. All right, thanks.
Hope they're taking care of it. I haven't done it more.
Okay,
We're down to 75.
and I was wondering, this is a new table. Could you just discuss this and why they put it in there? And I wasn't sure, I didn't see that it was referenced much in the document. Maybe it was and I missed it, but if you could just explain what that is and how it's gonna be referenced in this document.
Great question. Again, until you pointed it out, I didn't realize that they had put a new one in. But what this is really is just projection of where we're gonna be at in 2050 by the time we need or 2040, 2050, when we want to redo this document. So it's just a projection of population, couldn't speak.
So is there a way to reference it somewhere or?
I could
Can you
call,
follow?
see if Sam knows, or it was Robertson, Fuller, and whatever who
It's
did
gotta be
it.
a
So
reference somewhere in the document.
Yeah,
but I can see.
just so we know what, why it was put in there and how that's connected. So when you're reading along, it can say, okay, go to the TAS projections. And maybe this is a good time just to reiterate my very first point. There are a lot of random acronyms, letters and numbers. And I was thinking that maybe a glossary is an easier way to do it, because if we just do it the first time it's written, like TAS, what does TAS stand for, which I couldn't find anywhere. I look it up and I think it's talking about traffic analysis zone, but if we could have a glossary, so if I say, oh, I wonder what TAZ stands for, or HUD, most of us know what HUD stands for, but maybe not everyone, or
I
CDD.
agree. There's two ways to do it. You can either spell it out the first time and then abbreviate it. But in a big document like this, I may not find the original reference
Yeah.
to it. So I do think a glossary of terms anytime, I run into it in my work because the automotive industry is full of acronyms. I think
Yeah.
they're the kings of acronyms. But if a glossary of terms or references on the back,
Government, I think we have UFB.
And then just, some of those letters and the numbers, kind of like the mayor was talking in regards, to just let us know what those are. So if you don't mind, I'm happy to help put that together, and I'll go through what all the acronyms are that I
she just
think.
volunteered again.
And yeah, I don't mind. I'm happy to do it because I have spent so much time looking back and forth to see if it was ever discussed or spelled out initially. I think that would be.
I think the only reason I recognize half of them is because I spent 5 years on the planning commission. For those that haven't, the average person isn't gonna know what half those terms mean. And there's a lot in there that I didn't even know what they meant.
And the average person isn't gonna be reading the general plan. So again, you're not like, this isn't targeted at a layperson. I've lived in Roy for 37 years, and until I started getting involved,
Shame on you.
I know. I never even knew we had a general plan. So I'd only ever first read through it when I started to actually get actively involved.
On the planning
I
commission.
know,
Went to the
I
council.
know, I
That was a
know.
good transition, but
Yeah.
Okay, Steve, how do you want to
Okay.
approach this?
I just
Can I-
need three of you.
I just help you with that then?
Okay,
All right.
so Diane,
So if you're okay with it?
Yeah.
Okay. I
Diane will
think so.
help identify the wording, and if you can help
I'll
build
help
some
you
type
the
of
glossary.
a glossary.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay,
we're
continue on
moving-
with Diane, and I'm sorry, I was lost on this one, Diane, on page 91. I wasn't quite sure
you stumped him, Diana.
where you were referencing,
Okay.
because the second bullet point, I wasn't quite sure if that conversation
Okay,
UTA or.
we'd had the conversation in my previous notes that we were going to just take 4,000 South out because it says 4,000 South doesn't have major traffic issues, and it does have major traffic issues. And so my notes were that we were just going to say 4,800 South and take the 4,000 South out, just because that's.
New point. me.
Yeah. So the bottom of page 91 on the right corner, underneath opportunity,
Opportunity.
second
Okay.
bullet point.
Yeah, I was just looking at going,
Okay.
Because it just said second bullet point, and I was looking at all of them going, I'm not quite sure.
Out
So I'll
there.
just remove 4,000.
Right? And then in regards to that
Hold-
same, go
Hold
ahead.
that thought.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's make sure we're clear, because I need to make sure the council will support removing 4,000 from the second bullet on the right, down at the bottom under opportunity.
So you're taking out 4,000 South?
Correct.
We're
That
just-
was the recommendation.
or you can redefine it, but we had discussed that before because it says that 4,000 South doesn't have major traffic issues,
It does.
and it does, and
Oh.
so we just need to.
On the opportunities here, though, like they're referring 4,000 South because of the front runner, right? So
Then-
we're talking about.
Then you know what you
areas-
could do is just say neither have major traffic issues, just take that off then. Just because
For an opportunity.
it's,
where are
yeah,
we
it's
going
great
with
for an opportunity. Go ahead and work on it, because it needs lots of work. You could have a pedestrian network. But I think we just need to clarify that we're not we're not ignoring the 4,000
I
south.
wouldn't whisper that, Randy. I'd say it out loud. I don't know why we
Well,
don't
yeah,
get 4,000
To UDOT, I know, I brought this
You'd
up
have my
before.
vote.
Yeah.
As soon as Matt and I get back with our meeting with UDOT Region 1 Director, we'll put that on the table. Just recognize that one of the challenges going to be is that by transferring it to UDOT ownership, a couple of things take place. One is that their argument is going to be, we just put the Hinkley Drive, which has 5 lanes, and you're asking to divert that traffic off. And second, which we don't have Public Works here, Roy City gets so many dollars for so many miles of land. And if you take that portion out, then Roy City doesn't get those Class C funds, okay, for what we lose there. And then, of course,
Well, I understand the Hinkley Drive argument, but the problem is they made this humongous thoroughfare and it basically dead ends right at Midland Drive. And there are those that will take the diversion on the bridge to nowhere, as some calls it, or there's some that will go straight. And, you know, it's a main thoroughfare. You got the library there, you got the train station there. If you're not going northward, it's smarter to go up and turn southward. So
the only thing I would offer, Joe, would be first thing, if we're gonna have a serious conversation with them, then we've got to look at that impact. UDOT tracks how many on the lower part of 44,000 going into West Haven. So we can get the average daily trips that are basic vehicle trips actually in there. What we need then is to find out how much of that is actually coming all the way through. So if we want to put our meter and see if we can't calculate what that impact is. Because if there's a significant number of those that are coming up rather than making that detour, you have a good argument that says, hey, this is causing a problem. It becomes a better selling point, Randy. The idea that says the traffic has not been diverted to Hinkley, they're seriously coming up.
well,
We
and
better
you're
have some
gonna,
numbers.
you're gonna exacerbate that as soon as you develop your station plan.
Oh, I agree.
Because even though the whole purpose of a Todd is they're thinking people are using front runner and alternate forms of transportation, reality is they're probably gonna at least still have 1 car per household. Well, you add how many units down there at 1 car per household and you're still putting a ton more traffic there.
I just want to clarify, because this is under pedestrian network opportunities. 4,800 south and 4,000 south merge as big opportunities for walking, not cars. It's
Yeah.
talking about walking.
No, I
But it
agree.
says major traffic issues.
Yeah, what caught us spin is the conversation about
last-
transferring this over to UDOT. That's where we were trying to clarify that comment.
Well, either way, if it was a UDOT road, I'd still want a trail or walking to.
Sure.
Well, we
you
still
should.
need
Better
I
access
agree.
because
Yeah.
it's sketchy to walk
To
that cross.
specific to the general plan, though, do we just want to strike the language that says neither have major traffic
I
issues?
think so.
Because
That
Yep,
takes
they
care of
clearly
it.
do.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's.
Because the other problem you have is
Sophie?
there needs to be better pedestrian access
You bet.
from the north to the south side. Because if they're expecting more and more people to use the train, that's a sketchy crossing right there.
No, you're right.
That's what that.
And I'll be honest, to put it on the backs of the citizens to fix that, the only people that's gonna be able to afford to fix it's UTA or UDOT.
I agree, but I think I mentioned a year ago that I've looked at the West Side Regional Council's long-range plans. I think it's 2040, maybe 2045. And they're proposing a pedestrian bridge that will go over the tracks that drops right into the TOD and drops onto the trail. Obviously, it's way out there, but it's still out there.
widen it before we do that.
Probably
Not
could
on
be.
our,
If it's transferred to
Checkbook.
UDOT, certainly the argument.
Yeah, that's,
and reality says with Hinkley, you're probably never gonna get an overpass there, but I think widen it and making it more accessible. You know, the other thing is if we put the cemetery there, that's gonna generate more traffic and more foot traffic and
The only thing I will indicate is to widen that particular road, and we just have to put that in mind. You're basically talking about taking homes. It becomes real hard not to take those homes.
And that's our lower socioeconomic area.
And that's it's gonna be very costly, either costly for UDOT or costly for Roy if that widening concept goes through. So, but Joe, to your point,
You put the TOD requirements that's in there, the potential, there's gonna be a lot of traffic moving in and out of that road. And so I would just say, maybe for some evidence, how about if we just have the city, different conversation, but have the city go ahead and put a meter on it. Let's find out what traffic flows on there. And then more importantly, this is the before, then what is gonna happen after? And
Maybe you even, I mean, do a traffic study and maybe you only widen it from the roundabout to the train crossing, and clean up the train crossing, because it's already wider at the bottom. I'm not saying we have to have a 5-lane thoroughfare, but I think you need to open up that train crossing and you need to put a better thoroughfare where they're turning into the Todd, the train station.
Well, we'll flesh that out. We'll put it out in a council meeting, get some ideas how we want to pursue. But we do have a markdown, Randy, to the concept would be, what's it take for UDOT to consider?
Right.
And once we get that answer, then that would be a roadmap that the council wants to pursue that. Okay.
I'd really like to make sure we are very specific on what those pros and cons are, what the unintended consequences are
Oh, I
and
know.
that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's very, very issue. So I think what we agreed to on the second bullet is to remove that neither have major traffic issues. Take that comment out.
Yes.
You
So
okay with
Diane, you
that?
had one more, and I realized which one it refers to, but I didn't highlight it
Okay, Sophie,
on that
okay.
page.
Randy? Yep. Joe? Okay. Go ahead, next one.
So the bottom bullet point, I just wanted us
Of
to.
91?
Of 91. I just wanted to discuss just a little bit, we had talked about, not promoting and increasing catwalks because of the problems. This talks about increasing, the catwalks. And so I think we definitely want to increase the connectivity, but I'm not sure we want to promote the catwalk concept, the stub
Pathway.
ends, the dead ends and stuff like that. So I'm not saying, I think we should maybe say something like, you can create increased connectivity, but not,
Leave it broad,
do it broader and not.
yeah, not
promote
like
that.
specific.
Mhm.
Comments? Sophie, what's your thoughts on that one?
I'm okay with that. I like it. Yeah.
Okay, so, ready?
Yeah,
So
they
how are you
go more
gonna
broad.
change
Go.
that? So what are you gonna take out? That's,
Just takes
we'll
out.
strike out
the
the
stub tree, street, dead ends, streets and pathways and just go create connections.
Yeah, I like that, more broad.
yeah,
So the creek connections, so essentially to from uphill, downhill, in, out neighborhoods.
I think you could just say, create connections in the station area, and you could take that
Yeah.
other stuff, that whole to from,
focus,
only
Roy.
just, and
Okay.
of course you gotta change focus, right?
Yeah,
There's an error there, but yeah, then just that whole last little bit, to from, up and down, all around the town concept. I
Create
think.
connections in Roy Station area.
There you go.
And take out the rest.
Yeah.
You okay with that? Okay. We're on page 97.
And the bottom of page 97, it's just the same concept, prioritize 4,800 south and 4,000 south for active transportation and local vehicle traffic. And again, I think just say there is less traffic pressure on these streets. I mean, just take that part out and just say they could provide quality connections to citywide. Just take out the less traffic pressure on these streets, because somehow it's like whoever wrote this is using that as a justification. Well, the reason we should do that is because there's less traffic pressure. Well, the reason we should do it is because it makes sense to have the connection there, not because there's less, because there isn't. And so I just believe we should keep it there, but take that section out then.
So
And so just,
Simply start the paragraph or the sentence at they.
yeah, they
They
provide
provide quality.
quality connections, or just don't even say they, just say provide quality. I think we should not say they, we should say provide quality connections. Or something like that. Or do we can check the sentence, let me see.
Can you say they referring to the,
Yeah, I guess, yeah,
Say
they,
they.
you have to say they, yeah, go ahead and say they, yeah.
Randy?
yeah, that's fine.
Joe? Sophie?
Yes.
Okay, then just remove that, just that part of that one sentence.
Page 99, would you just explain this map, please?
You have to look on pages 96, 97, 98, where they're referencing, have numbers next to them. So this is just really putting it on a map showing,
Could you walk me through this, please?
I just, as much as I know.
I'm ready because we were kind of having problems with this before. I thought they were gonna fix a little bit and I'm not sure that it's any better than it was. So. I'm ready.
I've given you my explanation. I don't know. I just knew that they were commenting on those other pages. And this map references all those indications included on 96, 97, and 98.
I know what the intent was, because it was basically it's flagging,
Mhm.
but I couldn't make the connection between previous language written in it and how it relates to that. So I think your comment was pretty appropriate, just kind of help us understand the connectivities to that.
So maybe let's just stick with the top. It says general transit 14. So we go to 14, it says improve pedestrian crossings of major corridors. So I come here and I'm looking for 14. I'm not quite sure where 14 is. I see 12 and 13, but I don't quite see 14. So I'm not sure where that fits in. Okay, well, I'm not sure why we have 14. Okay, now let's go to 16. That's what 16 says. Monitor the need for further improvements to move regional. I do see a 16. I thought I saw a 16 once. Oh, no, that's a 15. Well, I'm not really sure where 16 is either.
Well,
Well,
I
all right,
can-
let's try 17.
I can call Sam to have him give me an explanation. I don't know.
Just
Because-
don't try to play connect the dots. It won't
I'm
work.
saying, if this is gonna be in here, we should know what it's for, or we should probably take it out. I don't know, what in reality, what do you think? I mean, why would we have a map here that nobody can figure out? It kind of makes this look like Dingle Fritz's.
Do you have to have this all put together from these individual, like
Oh,
that's? the
I mean, I
question.
like the idea of having a map there, but if it doesn't coincide or you can't find it on the map, it makes no sense to have the
Let
map.
me call Sam and get an explanation,
Thank you, all right,
Okay.
thank you.
and I'll send that out.
Okay, we just need feedback then. Steve, provide feedback with an explanation of what it is.
All right, on page 104.
Good catch. Page 104. Okay, now we're into the moderate income housing plan.
Yes, bottom left
Couple of comments on
paragraph.
this one.
I've got this one up there, Diane.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe we can just talk about the feasibility and when it says the city has begun the creation of 3 new CRAs, did we begun them or do we have them on the very bottom paragraph?
So we're not in the summary of housing direct.
That's where we are.
Well,
Let's
it's
take
just
it from
below
there
summary,
first.
but yeah, let's start with summary and
I think you said,
the biennial basis. I mean, each strategy should be applied during the next 5 period and undergoes a thorough assessment on a biennial basis. So I'm wondering, what does that include? Who does that? And is it feasible to have it on a biennial system? Is
Well,
that something
at
we're
least
setting ourselves up?
Annually, we have to have a report.
Okay,
So I think having it biannually, staff can sit down with the mayor and say, okay, where are we mid-year and how are we doing?
that's great. Now, are we setting ourselves up for failure though? Are we saying that we're gonna do it biannually and it's gonna be really hard to do it? And we should
I
just
think
stick
it
with
gives
annual?
us a guideline, but again, we're not hogtied to it. I know at least every September 29th, we're sending in a report to DWS.
So my understanding is if you set up an expectation, you can do more than the expectation, but it's not usually considered good if you do less than the expectation. So I don't think I'm going to be the one doing it. And so if you are sure biannual is fine, but maybe you should say annual, we should say annual. And then if you get biannually in there, that's super spiffy. But in my government experience, that's just what I had wondered. Is it feasible?
I-
I don't know.
so your comment would be is strike.
Strike by and make it annual.
Right. 'cause we
That way
know we're
we
gonna do
you
annual.
overachieve if we do a, yeah. as a sales guy, that sounds better to me too.
Under promise, over deliver.
Yes.
I'm with Daniel. I don't want to be tied, I don't want to be tied to, I don't want to tie somebody to doing this twice a year.
We can get away with just doing it once a year.
So we're gonna strike the word by, and we just use on an annual basis, which we have to report the.
Anyway,
So we
Modern
know
income
we're gonna
house
do
report,
that.
we have to do that.
Okay, and then on the next paragraph down,
Okay, so now we're in to the next paragraph. Okay.
strategy 1. And I was just wondering if we could review, the city has begun the creation of 3 new CRAs. Have we completed those? We haven't completed those? or
To
we
an
are?
extent,
We
the
got
city
as far
has,
as we can on a CRA, but it takes a project.
To be able to finish it. Okay.
So
we
he's
have to
correct
get
when he
with the other
says
municipalities.
I just
We
wanted
have
to
to
clarify
trigger, to
that.
trigger it, yeah.
There's a project triggers.
So it's been created, but not completed.
Not completed. Okay, thank you. And then I was wondering,
Okay,
No,
You
yeah,
haven't
but we-
showed my comments, so you're gonna wait.
Yeah, you're,
cool.
Next,
I
okay,
figured we'd go over hers and then come to yours.
okay.
Anyway, and so I just wanted to further discussion on, the change, the mayor talked about some of this where we changed some of the letters we were going to do. Because originally that section strategy 2 had different letters. This has the A, E, F, G, H. And so for me, I was just wondering if we could just review that in more detail so I had better understanding of that.
What A, E, F, G, H means?
Well, why they were changed, because it had been F, G, H, J. On this other one, it had been F, G, H, A. So I was just wondering why we had decided to change them.
Now,
And-
I'm trying to get a box. I've got a little comment. The original letters were from Senate Bill 34 in 2019. House Bill 462
Roll that up.
threw all that out, re-lettered things.
Okay,
So some of them, like we had in there, MNOSTR, were all combined into one and made it a new number.
okay,
There you go.
So in
that's all I needed to know.
September of last year, we kind of adopted the new numbers or new letters. So,
And so then part of the glossary or summary will say what these letters mean and what it refers to and which House bill it refers to. so
well,
that
when
we
you get
know
into the
that.
moderate income housing, it does say strategy A.
Mhm.
So that's what these refer to.
That's what those are. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 105, on the right side,
Hold on.
The mayor's got a bunch of
you want
comments
to
on
do that
this
on the
one.
same stuff?
Well,
Well,
here-
because
I
think
kind of
we're
separated your
gonna
guys'
finalize
comments,
it.
so
We gotta just finalize page by
same
page.
page,
That sounds
mayor's
good.
comments.
Yeah, let me grab yours.
Yeah, I think the premise of this one was just simply to say, it says utilize modern income housing set asides from the community reinvestment area. And so in essence, what it was saying is if we're taking an action on P that says we're going to start that process. And I think, remember, this was more or less a summary. We haven't got into the detail because those are actually in the next following pages. So this kind of sets a summary of what we plan to do and how we're going to do that. My comment in terms of wanting to add just a little bit more script inside of this particular one, which is strategy 1, was just to point out that Roy City had already taken initiative. We basically were there. Joe, you and I were on the planning commission when in 2014, they came to the city and they basically said, we would like to use, and I didn't know until I went into the DWS database. And actually the Station Square Apartments are currently operating under the low-income housing tax credit, okay, today, as well as the Orlean Walker Trust Fund multifamily. These are programs by which are help subsidizing the low cost to be able to put those 25 apartment complexes at that station. So it was more or less just simply says, even though this is kind of before 462 came out, it was really says, we have already taken action to make that happen. And I say city action, Joe, you may have remembered, we were asked to basically move that from light manufacturing zone
That's a big change.
to a high density residential zone. So this development could go in. Now, remember, it was just setting kind of the stage of what we've already done. And then now what we're planning to do, which is really kind of articulated in the statement that says the city now has gone and done more. City has 2 existing RDA projects. We've set up the CRAs. We're now focused on housing, but just let them know that we've already started this journey back in 2017. And that was the whole premise of wanting to say, why don't we add that, just that little bit of terminology, right at strategy 1. That was the premise of the conversation.
I think that it gives a good precedent of how we're moving forward and kind of helps complete, because this moderate the income housing section is important for a general plan, but it's also important for a bigger realm.
Which is the document we have to basically provide to,
If everyone likes this, just so I want to be clear, Mayor, you want this as the first paragraph in that
yeah,
subsection?
only because it begins the
Right, it makes-
conversation and rolls through it. That's right.
I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
as I'm making my notes of what changes.
I mean, basically, we're just touting some things we've already done.
Yeah. Now,
Let's
we
show
kind
the
of did
work.
that too. If you kind of go back in this document, and I want to bore you, but to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, back in, well, within this document, we kind of did a similar thing. Apologize, hold on just one second. I'll pull it out. Because it was really talks about that Roy City has not been stagnant. Now, we have basically taken action to really make some things happen. We mentioned in 2016, we were awarded infrastructure improvements from the Wasatch Regional Council. We got funding to do that. We put it in there. We also said something all the way back in 2014, which I thought was, I didn't know that until I read in this document, that basically pointed out that we actually did some things way back in 2014, and it's also in this document. So in essence, what I'm suggesting is that rather than this being a start today goal, this is, we've been working at
It
this.
sells the fact that we've been doing things and we're building on it, so I don't have a problem adding it.
That was the whole premise. Yep. You okay with just putting that little paragraph in there to
Yes.
kind of set that stage? The only thing I would ask Steve would be is that, would you just make sure that what I put in there is correct? I pulled this information from literally the DWS
The
data.
qualifier.
And
Check my work.
the only interesting enough about that is, I don't even know if we're taking credit for that.
Well, I know one thing, it's 31 units, not 25, but I'll check on the age.
Isn't interesting, because when I read the DWS data, it says that we're doing 25.
They might have restrictions on 25 and some of them are
Some of them are actually.
But
no
it's still
restrictions.
the
Oh,
whole community. Because I know when we were talking with them at the stationary plan, they said that they do have some that are market, some that are 80, some are 50. and so
well, the report that's going into DWS indicates that 25 units there.
So
are
they're,
actually
they're only concerned with what,
What's in that program.
yeah, not the market value.
Market value. Okay,
But I still think 31 units, regardless if 6 of them are market,
Right.
still helps show that things are,
we're moving on that. Okay.
and I could put 31 units with 25 of modern low income housing.
Okay, so let's just,
But I'll double check and I'll call them and see if it's 62 plus or if it was 55 plus, or I can't remember.
we put it as 60, it's actually, the law says 55 plus. That's the low income, or excuse me, it's the federal low income housing tax credit is 55 plus. But if I remember right, reading it, this is a 62-year plus, 60-year
I
plus
can't remember.
development. Anyway,
It's been several years.
just refine that just a little bit if you don't mind.
I'm just glad that public hearing for that rezone was, nobody came.
Okay, so next one,
Next one is under strategy 2. Mayor, you kind of had the,
yeah, this one, strategy 2. As you can see, I pretty much laid out everything right up front as you had it. The only thing that I asked that maybe consider adding was that piece you can read there, and it's kind of hard to read.
it's
But we-
taken.
Yes,
yeah.
these requirements. Okay, we're just, if you can read that right there, it kind of just follows along that same line. There you go. And it says the downtown place district. I appreciate you putting that in there because I didn't use the place comment. These are parking requirements to ensure the appropriate level of vehicle parking. Now, why this is important is that this particular strategy, this strategy basically talks about 3 things. And I just want to make sure that we understand what the strategy is talking about. It talks about the requirements that are found in those five strategies. So A, E, F, G, H. We did a really good job at the top up there talking about the strategies and spelling that out, mixed use developments, looking at those things. Those are really good. That talks about 3 of those strategies, but we only slightly mentioned about the parking. In fact, we only used the word parking requirement. And yet one of those strategies specifically talks about parking. And the last strategy, which is H talks about the internal accessory dwelling units of those 5 on top. And there's no reference in that text about the IADUs. And yet that is probably, between that one or E, is probably one of the ones that we're so far ahead in terms of our ability to really get, if you will, our arms around that. In fact, there's E right up there. So my point would be is just adding a little bit more to that paragraph that drags in what we did in terms of parking. So a little more clarity in parking under strategy 2, and then what we did in terms of the auxiliary dwelling units, which we've already done as well. That was
As
the
long as
whole
it doesn't trip up anything with DWS.
Yeah.
word for
and
word. everything we
provides
put in there.
clarification, I don't see a problem with it.
Most of what they're gonna look at is the next following pages of what the strategy is, what's our timeline, what's our implementation. They'll look at this, but this won't trip it. It's the next following
Yeah,
pages.
this is not a showstopper. It's a nice entry into what we've done and what we're doing, but it certainly is not a showstopper. But I did want, and I felt, since those 5 at the top do include specific issues dealing with parking and specific issues dealing with the auxiliary dwelling units, that there at least be a little bit of reference, okay, in that paragraph that talks to those pieces. And it didn't, and I'm suggesting is we just kind of do that little clarification.
Yeah, I think that's
You okay
good.
with
you
that?
know.
I'm good with it.
Okay, then we'll go with that. Thank you. I didn't have anything with the strategy 3. I thought we did well.
Oh, sorry.
So,
Okay, so Diane, the next one is yours, page 105.
Okay, if you take a look at the, on the right side, the housing cost burden ratio table. Actually, if you look just above the table, it says, however, the ratio is nearing the burden threshold. That's actually probably not really accurate. I think we should omit that, because if you take a look at this and you say what the ratios are, actually have been improving. If you take a look at the bottom of that table, in 2010, our Roy median rent to renter income ratio actually decreased. Both of those numbers, they decreased. And so I believe that this was just a cut and paste. They probably had it there from something else. And I don't believe that, that's accurate, and that we should remove that sentence. However, the ratio is nearing the burden of threshold, because 30% is the burden, and, you know, we're at, yeah, we've still got anywhere from 33% to the burden, you know, 17, 18, 20% to 33%. So I just felt that that was inaccurate and probably just something that they copied and pasted.
comment,
I don't see any harm in it.
Steve, thoughts?
I'm just here to get your guys' comments.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think the sentence hurts to have it, but
However,
Sophie?
the ratio is nearing the burden threshold. Well, actually, it's improved and it's not.
Yeah, take it out.
Randy?
Go ahead and strike
Okay
it.
with that?
Yep.
Okay, remove. Okay, that's 105.
So if we look at page 107, if you look down at the bottom table, A 4-8, you've changed the years, but they didn't change the data.
Yep.
So I believe that that's an error, and I'm sure they must have that data because they've redone everything else, but
according to them, the data was exactly the same because it hadn't been updated since 2017. So they just changed the years, so it was up to date, but it's the same data.
Is it the same?
So $1,471
Yeah, that's
for the last,
what my understanding was.
Or where they get the data
Hmm.
from hasn't been updated, so.
so does that mean we should be
A survey
leaving?
may have been 5 years old, 4 years old, and
Yeah.
everybody's using the same database.
Does that mean we should be leaving those years? I mean, it's nice to have those, but if that hasn't changed, that's almost,
I just know there was
years
the
back then.
question, the thought of bringing everything to today's dates.
That was the original thing come out of the.
It was.
So that's, I
yeah.
think that's why they changed it, but the data hadn't changed, so they couldn't update.
So I'm thinking if they can't update it and those other years are more accurate, we should leave what's accurate. And if they don't have 21, 22 data, then I think that that's a bit of a misrepresentation if they don't have that data. I mean, it's nice to put new numbers, but if the data is not
But
accurate.
there's another component, Diane. The format in terms of what has to be submitted under the report has to be exactly what they want. The data has to be right, you're right. But if we're required to put the HUD fair market rents for Ogden Clearfield data,
Okay,
and that's it,
all right.
then we have to
Call it
live with
good.
I was just
And
gonna say,
that is actually accurate as far as HUDuser.gov. I mean, I just
Cool.
pulled up the actual
Okay.
document, so
because
it's
they're
accurate.
pulling, they have to pull that number from HUD.
from HUD.
From the, okay,
So.
well, that's super
And
duper that it
again,
hasn't changed.
Next year, when we do the report, some of this data is gonna change anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, when we talked about it in the last meeting, we said it needs to really be up to date because they're
Right.
pulling old data. And sounds like he did, and the data hasn't changed, which questions the validity of the data, but not sure how we can get away from that right now.
Okay.
Okay, you're
Okay,
on.
so page 110, I know Mayor's got some comments on this page, but again, kind of, it got really messy. That's why I kind of split things up on pages. Or it'd be all blue and orange, so.
So which one do you want to start with, Diane, in terms of her comments on A and P?
I'll just start with hers.
That's fine.
She had some comments on that, providing a time frame for rezoning properties.
It's the same language.
Same language for both A and F.
Right, let's see here. Let me just remind myself. Okay, so under, on the bottom of page 110, under strategy 2, under A, it says timeline. Providing a time frame on rezoning property is difficult as the city merely processes application and doesn't have control or influence on when applications are submitted. Okay, granted, we don't have control over when applications are submitted. However, it sounds, I believe, very negative. It says we merely process, because I don't believe that's accurate. We just went, then we're very proactive. We just changed the zoning for downtown and Station Park. And so I believe that wording should be different, not to just say merely. And we could reword it and say, you know, and we do, that we don't have any control or influence.
I got kind of a suggestion.
Oh, great.
So taking merely out and say for the most part, because going back to 2014, we've had 38 applications and 36 of them were done by an applicant. So 2 of them were from the city. So for the most part, we're waiting for applications. Doesn't mean we don't. My
Okay.
suggestion would just take out merely and put for the most part,
Okay,
unless you've got other language you would like to. That's just, I sat down with Andy and
okay.
his knowledge of wordsmithing seemed to,
I think that sounds good because I think it acknowledges that there's more to it than
that
that.
sometimes it's not just sitting back, but
Right.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
I think the next one is the mayor.
Okay,
Okay,
I've got your charts on the next slide.
okay. Maybe just before we jump into charts, let me just kind of set at least my view in terms of the intent. When I sent the document out with my comments, was really an intent would be is what does the law say? And then what did the comments we received from two different sources say? One being the DWS non-compliant letter, and the other one is the DWS pamphlet that they posted out there that says this is what they're looking for. And that gets really complex because to be very honest with you, you could arguably say, I'm only going to follow what the law says. And the law language says timeline, measures, benchmarks, on time, ongoing, flexible. That's what it says. After you pick the 6 or 7 strategies, then each one of those have to be structured in that. Then it comes back and says, okay, that's the base year. And then in the next law, which is in 408, it comes back and says, okay, DWS, this is what you in fact should, this is what the city should be doing with what you started in the 2022 to 2023 time. This is what is in fact expected in the 23 and beyond. Remember, this is a 5-year plan. And then it articulates some things about make sure it has an implementation plan. It talks about descriptions of each action, okay? It talks about on time, one time, ongoing. And then it says some interesting things. It says, make sure you talk about any land use regulation changes. So if you started off with this and you had to make modifications to land use regulations, then document that changes were. And then it gets into something that was really kind of off the wall. It started talking, and by the way, that has to be done in terms of previous fiscal year to the new fiscal year. And then explain how the land use regulation or the land use decision then basically supports what you did. So if you went in there, for an example, if we didn't have our IADUs done, then we would say we would change the thing, we do an assessment, we do that, and we would change the law. This is what it was, this is what it is, what did that do? And you can show a clear line between the starting year and the second year, which we changed the law. Now, luckily for us, most of those laws got changed. A lot of what we're talking about already got changed before we even entered this. What was interesting, and the reason why I pointed it out, is what is in 408 in terms of what DWS is going to assess our plan to. So we have directions in terms of the base year, October 1st, 2022 to the 31st of September, 2023. That's the first year. And it says, this is what I want you to do in the first year. And then every year after that, for 4 years, it's a 5-year plan. Here's what I'm going to be looking for. Now, they told DWS a couple of things that really just caught me. And here, I'll read them to you, because this is where it gets interesting. It says, you have to have your plan. We got it. We identified 3 or more or 5 or more. We're at 5 or more because we have a train station. This one says, make sure it's in the right formal document. So it can be a report or it can be the general plan. Ours is going forth as a general plan. So it's in the right document form required. Then it says it wants a description of each moderate income strategy. So the top of every one of these, you can read it. They want it word for word, exactly what the law says. Got that? Then it says, I want you to do this. Provide sufficient information for the division. This is the DWS division to assess the specific municipality's progress. Let me repeat that. Progress. So here's the baseline. We call those, in the world I came from, that's the benchmark. You start with the start point. The delta. And then you measure, in essence, progress in terms of what you did the following year. And then it says, if you've already completed, which some of our have already been completed, then you have to go in what's called a monitor review process. So now it says, hey, we've completed the change of the ordinance. It says, hey, if you completed the requirement, and if you look in E, you'll find that E is, in my opinion, fully compliant. Fully compliant. We're there. It says, if you reach that level, then you need to go in what's called a monitor and review process. But even with that, you have to put in and put some measurements in to show that progress. Then it says, it once again, identify clear correlation, okay, to land use regulations. This is in the law, the land decisions. And this is where it got really, really interesting. They said, quote, identify how the market has responded to your change. Wow. That's the law.
Is that for the report or in the plan?
then well, that's a good point, because now the question is that says what DWS is supposed to be looking for, but it was never clear whether or not they're gonna look at the first year or the base year, or whether that's gonna be ongoing years. But it states that, so we don't know what that means, except you have to say, okay, has the market changed? And if the market changed, then capture that change. Okay, kind of makes sense. So you step back and you say, okay, where do we go from here? Because it gets really interesting after that. Then you read the DWS Director's Letter. Now, this is not law. She sent a letter, says, this is the area you need to consider when you're doing your plan, okay? Both your general plan amendment, which is what we're doing, and then follow-on reports. So she throws in a couple of interesting things. She says, I want to look at accessory dwelling unit information. Now, that one caught me a little cold, because what you'd have to do to be able to determine accessory dwelling unit information, remember, we tagged that as one of our requirements. We said, and I'll read it, it is actually found in E, create or allow for and reduce regulations related to the internal or detached accessory dwelling units in residential zones. So she says, put in there then, if in fact you're starting to see accessory dwelling unit information. Now, my sense on that is it's okay, we can baseline, and I guess we can do that because according to our ordinance, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, if a person establishes an auxiliary dwelling unit, accessory dwelling unit in their house, they're supposed to file for a license. So if he took all of the licenses that we have on the books today, that becomes the baseline. And then over the preceding years under E, since we're now in monitoring it and reviewing it, we can show progress in year 2, year 3, year 4 of how many licenses we've got. I mean, that would be the end. That'd be the obvious way to do it if the person's doing according to the law. Then she says, which caught me completely cold, she says, have you got any barriers? What's limiting you to do this? See, it's not found in the law, but it specifically makes sense if you think about it. It says, I really want to go down this path, but I have this problem. And she says, tell us what those problems are. What's causing you able to not to do what you need to do? And interesting enough, if you kind of read down a little bit further, they like that feedback if in fact there's something in the state law or something that's causing you unable to do that. And I'm almost done. They want the marketing strategies, we talked about that. And then in essence is the same things we talk, actionable tasks. Now the last thing, and this is where I kind of roll it all together. I read the pamphlet. This is the document that's sitting out there for everybody who's building a moderate income housing element or plan or report. It calls out things, everything I just mentioned. And then it says, forecasting for moderate income housing. Now, this is a tough one. The issue here is that how do you know after you've done all of this work if it made a difference? And I see nothing in anything I read that told me how you determine that, except Steve put in there one document, one table, which is called, well, what it's called, it's just in there. But it talks about where we have differences between what we need to have and where we are. So he says between the equal to or less than 80% of the HMFI, which is the household area median family income, there are 40 unit deficit on that one. 50 equal to or 50% of the HAMFI, it's 230 deficit. This is in the report. And if you're equal to or less than 30% HAMFI, we're 260 units. So to me, if one is going to argue you're making a difference, and this is where it gets gray, then to me is that those numbers will be coming closer to zero.
I would agree.
Yes. I mean, that makes sense. And that's the only measurement we can. So then he says this in this report, forecasting the moderate income housing, the number of moderate income housing units to be built. That's what he said right there. And the possible locations for new moderate income housing units. So now what you're saying is, okay, now I'm starting to get a visual. If I can use that table as a gauge on table A47, then it says, okay, for me to get where I need to be in the less than 80, I need to come up with 40 units. And I says, this is my target. I want to get 40 units for this one. And oh, by the way, I think they'd be perfect if we put them in the train station. Where else? I mean, pick a spot. You can argue any spot and do the same. And then the last comment, it specifically talks about responsible parties. Now, why is that relevant?
They want to know who they can hang.
Well, they want to know who's responsible. And you go through that and you start to ask the question, you simply says, okay, you got an implementation plan. And you says, these are the things you have to measure, these are the benchmarks, these things are either on one time or ongoing, need the measurable tasks that you're going to do. And then who's responsible to collect that? And I wouldn't say by name, but by function. Is that
I
the
would say
mayor?
by position, definitely. You
position.
can't say name because you might be gone tomorrow and I might be gone in a week from now.
Exactly. But somebody has to generate the report, has to generate the information, and has to assemble that. And that has to be filed October 1st of every year.
So they're saying responsible party is who's filing the report, not who is responsible for making sure this moderate income housing has been improving from moving forward, huh?
Well, to me, responsible part can very well be, it can be wherever the city council says in the plan, who's responsible to implement that task. I think there's more validity in that concept than there is about simply says the city planner's responsibility to do the reports, therefore it's his responsibility to do it all. The reality of that is that there are so many different tasks that have to be done to be able to make this implementation plan work. It would be difficult to simply says we're going to rest that responsibility only on the city planner. And by the way, if you kind of look at it from a broader perspective, is it maybe it will be, there's other people within the city who's better equipped to be able to measure that rather than one person. But at the end of the day, the full report has to be done by the city planner. And the city planner then has to do that with the planning commission. And the planning commission has to do their part to send it to the council with recommendations before you approve it. So what I tried to do in terms of what I was framing was simply taking everything that we have, every law, every recommendation, everything, and summarize that into some type of methodical process that brings all of it together and capture, if you will, everything that Steve put into the document to bring some clarity and says, this is what we're going to do and who's going to be responsible to do it. That was the whole premise.
Where did we get the table A47 Roy housing gap? Where did that come from? Because I doubt you, yeah,
Well,
consultant.
that comes also from DWS and HUD and that kind of data.
Right.
And when, in the past, when I've done those reports, that's where I've gotten the information.
And to me, if you bring these numbers closer to zero, then your plan is doing what it's designed to do, which is deal with the housing, Roy housing gap.
Correct. Well, and again, going back to like exactly what you're saying, what are the metrics by which we measure? And I think I've said this in public meetings, is we need something to base it off of. So the Roy housing gap, wherever we're getting that from, should be our starting point.
Yep.
Boom. And then we want to see a reduction.
Right.
Unless market conditions come back and dictate otherwise.
And to me, and that's an interesting point because it calls that out.
Right.
Now the question is going to be is, Roy City has done everything that we could
Correct.
do.
Right.
But how's the market reacted to that?
And if we look at it, the current market with interest rates where they're at, there's an absolute cooling. And there's no way to bring those numbers down because the access to, cheap capital is no longer there for these developers to go out and do these large projects. So that would be what we'd want to take and report back.
And report that back.
Correct.
That's the logic behind it. Okay, now, I framed it, but here's the piece I didn't know, and it's important that you two explain that because they've got some handshakes already with DWS of what DWS is looking for. And I think arguably, and I'll only make this comment, if it is in conflict, what I've laid out in front of you in 30 pages, sorry, but that's how my mind works. If what I laid out to you in 30 pages of implementation strategy is in conflict to what they've been told they want, then we need to take the pieces that make sense and just add those to what's there. Because if I understand what I think I understand, DWS, correct me if I'm wrong, Brody, Steve, DWS with a few modifications here is willing to accept this is our response.
Yeah, so they've accepted the version that's in the general plan right now for the plan. And it's, I wish this was, I'm gonna say it anyway. The statute is really difficult because it refers to the plan that has to be done in the general plan, which is what we're doing. But then a lot of the detail actually goes to the report of the plan. And it's actually a very difficult statute to work through. So a lot of the stuff the mayor's saying, he's 100% right, referring to the things we're gonna have to report on based on this plan. And how we do that, I don't know that anyone knows exactly, because it's very interesting, because the statute refers to the legislative body doing the report, but it also says DWS chooses the form for the report.
That's right.
The form for it this year was in a way that the legislative body could not submit the report. So there's some conflict there that I think they're still working through. The plan right now is approved. We have it pre-approved, and they're doing this. Alyssa is her name. She got tasked with doing this when every city attacked DWS back before Christmas. So we have what's in your report already is pre-approved. We also sent them a version prior to council that has the language changes, most of which came from Diane and the mayor, that add some of that stuff that we've already done tonight, adding language in to clarify, not using as many acronyms, citing to the specific codes. They have approved that as well, basically saying you can have that additional language as long as we're not touching the implementation plans and those type of things. That's what DWS is really reviewing.
So if they're okay with that, I mean, I'd probably run with what was proposed.
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
It comes down to simply says, how do we proceed? Now, I will indicate to you, I've looked at this thing all different ways. There's a couple of pieces in here that I'm really struggling with, and I made comment on those. Let me be specific. Since we're there,
With strategy, sorry.
let me pull up a couple so you can kind of see what I'm. So if I went into page 111, which would be the next page, don't look, that right there. I'm going to just read my concern, and you can take it for what it's worth.
I'm sorry, on
I'm
111.
going to look at G,
Sorry.
what's posted in
Okay.
G already. So go to G real quick. Okay, right there. If you look at G at the top, assuming we can go ahead and clarify the adopted and provide some clarity to those acronyms.
Yeah,
It says implementation measures evaluate the mixed use or multifamily codes every 2 to 3 years. My concern with that is that this is an annual requirement, and we're required by statute to be able to provide an annual report. It runs for 5 years. If the review of this particular process only runs every 2 to 3 years, then in essence, we're saying is there may not be any evaluation that will occur on this particular evaluation process of this particular G for 2 or 3 years. And I'm not so sure it should be that way. I think it should be an annual review to report. And there may very well be not any changes, but if there
That's
is.
what I was
then
gonna
we
ask.
report
If
the
we
change.
change it to annual, I mean, really, if nothing's changing, we evaluate it and we move forward.
You have to just report nothing's changed, but the report has to be, in my opinion, has to be at least annual in this. Okay, and there's two other ones in this as well.
Did they accept 2 or 3 years?
Everything
Well,
that's written on here
Then
has been
I'm
accepted.
kind of the thing that if we do it every year, which we will be, it sounds better than this. And so it's kind of that similar principle.
They've said yes.
Yeah, we
They
said,
said yes?
if they've said yes to us doing it, however, but was it 2, 3 years? Yeah, but we're taking and we're providing an annual, we look like the stellar student.
I think the reason why they were okay with 2 to 3 years and not annually is because we've already done it. It's already this one being the regulations for higher density, new modern, we've already done it. That's why the adopted it was important. Because before I just said adopted one time, and then they asked, well, expand. And so we said, okay, downtown was done this time, front runner was done at this time. And they were okay with it. I do like what Mayor had sent out earlier. Let's clarify a little bit more, make that language a little bit better. And they're okay with, clarifying the timeline. It's the implementation members. We can put annually, but generally in a general plan, you don't review annually. It's as things come up or every couple of years.
Evaluate and amend or update as needed. I personally do not see a value in changing it every year. I would evaluate it. I like what it says, evaluate it every 2 to 3 years. I mean, even from a planning commission standpoint, you're not going to update your codes every year.
But the law says that basically there has to be an annual review and measure. And there has to be shown some level of progress. And my point is, are we conflicting in the language? If we say every 2 to 3 years and the law says every year, you have to show progress. Not show progress, you have to be able to document if there is progress.
Right.
But my conversation would be, remember, this certainly is going to be an element within the general plan. It will not necessarily, well, that's an interesting comment. If there's substantial changes in how we do the moderate income housing, then the general plan has to be updated to conform to the moderate income housing report, because it's now a required element. Before that, it may not have been a required, it is a required.
Yeah,
It's going to make it to where you can't meet it.
the general, so to amend the plan, we have to go back and amend the general plan. If you want to amend the minority income housing plan, but the report has to be done every year. So then the report is, we have this, the plan says every 2 to 3 years. The report then, it's really, do we want for the report's sake to say, well, we actually review this every year? Unless, am I missing something there?
No, it's an annual requirement. I guess the question would be is how do we want the general plan to talk to that? If as a minimum, at least in this particular case, the argument was, it simply says it'll be reviewed every year. It's an annual review. Even if the annual review shows that there has been no change, at least the report that we have to file will give the specifics in terms of why there was no change. But at least the document simply says, we're not going to not do it every year and only do it 2 to 3 years. But again, here's the piece I struggle with. I've struggled with this thing. When somebody in DWS tells a city planner, it doesn't need to basically go through city council for approval. And we sent the document down there. And then I pinned them down there with my letter. And all of a sudden somebody read the law and came back and simply says, no, you're supposed to send it through the city council. Somebody in DWS down there, in my opinion, gave our city and probably other cities the wrong information. In fact, so wrong, I think I mentioned in the last meeting, I went through 20 or 30 of these things across the state, and 70 to 80% of those were junk. It's almost like they didn't even read the document. And I can understand why I've come back so bad. If they were getting misinformation in this conversation with DWS on this, then darn, we can't do that. But my point is, I can't speak to what they talked about, but I can certainly speak of what I defined in terms of each piece of what I present in front of you. I can not only show you and defend everything I've said here based on 5 documents. 3 that are in the law, 2 become the DWS director who sent that non-compliance letter back, and the 3rd in terms of the DWS pamphlet that they posted out for the world. Those 5 documents are absolutely clear, and this strategy implementation plan I defined here is exactly what they said is required. Now, not knowing what they had, not knowing what come out of that conversation, not knowing what we have fits with what they're looking for, I was not part of that conversation. But here's what I have to take for granted. If the bottom line would be is, our team says what we have is fine, All we need to do is provide some clarification on some acronyms. We think that's going to sell, and they believe they're willing to put this whole thing at risk and say, yes, we're set, we're ready to go. Then council, you just have to make an interesting decision. Do we want to just make the few modifications for clarity? Maybe we could change the annual from 2 to 3 years to annual, and then push the button and say go. Or do we want to do a deep dive into an implementation plan, which I certainly have broken out here, and then say we're going to change it? And I guarantee you, if we decide to go with what I've laid out here, this is blind faith. We don't have enough time today to get through it all. But if you wanted to go deep, what I've provided to you is a deep dive into exactly every piece of information we have. And I put together, in my opinion, okay, what that strategy plan, implementation plan is supposed to look like.
I'm by no stretch of the imagination a modern income housing expert.
Neither am I.
I've got to rely on our professional staff on this one, period, cut, dry, full stop. You guys, I believe, have done your due diligence. You've been in constant communication with DWS on this, and they have given the pre-approval of what we have provided. Understandably, like I said, if it comes back and they're not happy with that, then I think we would probably need to pivot over
Too
to,
late.
would be,
Too late.
okay?
If this gets disapproved, there's not a third swing at it.
It has to be by,
It has to be in compliance by the 15th of February. And what that means is that what it means is, if you read the law, then the DWS director sends a letter to the governor's office of economic development. They changed the name now, it's something else. Sends a letter to UDOT. And that letter going to UDOT says that Roy City is no longer eligible for 1 season, 1 year, to get any transportation investment funds and transportation investment funds for 1 year. And it tells the governor's office up there that Roy City cannot apply for any type of grants to help in the development. That's what the law says. So this is it. This is the swing. That's the reason why we're making a judgment call here. It's got to be right. And I'm putting blind faith on the fact is they heard it right from somebody who knows what they're doing that says we can submit this and get the pass button. But if it fails, I'm telling you, there's not a third shot at this. This is it. It's
My
done.
concern is the ship's already sailed to do a deep dive. If we can clarify and tune up the language a little bit, and we've already got a pass from DWS, I think that's what we've got to go with.
Do we have the past documented? I mean, have you got date and time and this lady, she said this, oh, you got an email? So she said she agreed, so.
Yeah, and so what she agreed to, and sorry, and I have it here. She basically agreed to our edited document where I took some of Diane's comments and the mayor's comments that we did prior to last council meeting. We crafted that into the plan and asked them what they thought of that. They gave approval for this document. So,
They did it for what you see
Yeah,
on
they did it
here,
for both.
plus kind of the redefining and what is downtown, what is the different zones. We modified that and they said, no, as long as you're not really changing what you're doing in the future, what you've done in the past is okay. So some of the language that was kind of proposed a couple weeks ago was, they've already said, we're good with that too.
I know this doesn't justify it, but misery loves company. I got to think if we fell in this, there's a whole bunch of other cities that are failing in it too.
And just so you know,
I don't
within the
want to raise that banner.
I don't either, but
But they've set the bar
I
incredibly.
think what Royce, here's the key, Joe. Wasatch Front Regional Council has basically made it clear. And by the way, I thought we were going to be number 2. It looks like there's another one, stationary plan that's coming out of Salt Lake that's going to get approval Thursday. I thought we'd be number 2 out of the docket. Okay, but we're going to be probably number 3 or number 4. If in fact we get, okay, ready to get a stationary plan, ready to move, and it's ready to go. And with that, what comes out of that would be is if we don't get this right, then the funding that a developer may want to use in terms of drawing on grants and anything that's dealing with transportation investment comes up with these things, okay? basically is out of the game for Royce City for a year. Out. And they have no choice. They have no choice.
No, I get it. I just,
I don't want to raise the banner and simply says, I'm with the other 50% of the cities that got it wrong. I want to be on the banner that basically says, we got this one right, and we get to be able to move forward. My fear is going to be is if it's not right. Again, everything hinges literally on a comment on an email. And if we believe that that email is justification to move forward based on what was explained, then I'm saying is that there's risk. But if that's how we want to go, then we
I'm
go.
gonna give you a little history. The week after we got the letter, Brody and I had a meeting with both Alyssa, who wrote the letter, and her supervisor, asking exactly what it is you need, what do you want? And then from that moment on,
person, just by chance?
no, by Zoom. From that moment on, I was in constant, at least 2 or 3 times a week. Alyssa, how about this language? Oh, you need to do this. Okay, come back. Brody and I would sit down, we'd look at it, modify it. Alyssa, how about this link? Oh, that F looks great. Okay, check that one off. How about, so we went through all 7 of our things. And I think there was at least 8 emails going back and forth. The report from last week identified how many times. It's not just one time, hey, we're doing it and we're done. It was from November 18th to January 3rd. Every week I was sending her new text.
But I guess my comment was that I don't know when you and I sent our comments forward, okay? I pushed mine out there sometime, but it was certainly after they had their first conversation. And to me, somebody in DWS was to read those acronyms without any explanation. And they said that looked good. That concerns me. Because what does DTE mean? And I keep thinking is a distance to empty. And I don't think DTE means distance to empty.
downtown east. I was
Only
there.
you and about 5 other people know exactly what that means. So them going up there saying is, yeah, I like that DTE and that DTW and that DTO and that tells me it says somebody down there doesn't have a clue.
I mean, I'll be honest, I read all 32 pages of your comments 2 nights ago, and I didn't sleep the whole night because my brain wouldn't stop. It's like, where the hell are we in this process?
I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I'm to the point where I think I'm not the expert. I feel like I have a fairly good knowledge coming from a planning commission background, but a lot of this stuff, their own documents don't even make sense to me. And so I don't know how anybody could interpret. So I don't know. I've got to rely on, maybe it all hinges on that email that she says it's good. And, if it comes back and it's not good, that's the document right there that I'm going to say, hey, you pre-approved everything we sent.
Yeah.
Maybe they
Versus,
need
yeah.
to replace you, or maybe you need to give us a pass.
So legally, that would be evidence that we could submit and we should win our case.
Yeah, and actually, it's interesting in the statute, the very last section actually talks about if you sue the state or DWS for their wrongdoing, you get injunctive relief and you can get certain types of relief, but you don't get damage relief. Which actually tells you a little bit about what certain people thought about the statute.
I mean, reading all 32 pages, and I did probably exactly what you did, Mayor. I went back and forth from every document, and I didn't know which way was up by the time I was done reading it.
Well, and all I'm saying is that if you look at the methodical process I laid out in those documents, the intent would be is following everything that's been provided to us, everything by the letter, what the law says, and what the recommendations were from the DWS director. It covered every one of those. Maybe the interesting question will be this. I do not believe there's anything in that document I sent you that is wrong. But the question then becomes, is that in sense maybe the foundation by which we build the report on and not the general plan on?
That's
That's-
probably the
that's
direction
probably-
I would
no, I
head.
like
That's
that.
the
I like
longevity.
that idea.
Then we simply says, okay, we get this thing approved, hopefully with some clarification, because I wouldn't turn this over to anybody without clarification. And then that gets approved. And then we take the 30-page document and we says, okay, this is an implementation plan that provides the clarity, the detail. And on October 1st, back up, it'll be the second week in September, then the report that we have to do by law and do that every year for 5 years, that report will be based on what we have to find out from this particular document. Who's responsible? What are they looking for? In accordance to what the law says. And if that's the smart approach, then we use that simply as a tool to get to the report.
I'd probably rather under promise, over deliver. So submit what we have a pre-approval on and then come back when we do our report and do it to the nth degree that's documented there.
Yeah.
That, yeah.
Our mirrors.
Just for what it's worth, and I don't have the bill numbers yet. I know Senator Fillmore.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
and someone
probably all
else
gonna
are
change.
running bills on this, on specific to the T-TIF and the TT-TIF money, Class C money, and also the report.
Class C? Oh.
So when we get an actual bill, we'll send that out because a lot of this is actually tied to Senator Fillmore and his work and his bill coming. So
You know
I
what
think
happens
we have
when
to
they
hang our hat on the
take
email.
funds into this?
$2.5 million.
It will change everything.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And the sad part is it's a few cities that haven't done anything.
Looking for.
It's crazy.
Affordable housing
Well, that's the
bill
problem. You're
that's still
shooting at a
being
moving
debated.
target and that target's moving faster than I can acquire it.
Oh, it's protected because they're not ready to release it. So
So
watch for it. Okay.
Target
keep what's
acquisition.
kind of written.
Yeah.
Base the report kind of on what the mayor.
yes, that actually makes a lot
I
more
mean,
sense.
we talked about some changes tonight. Is any of those changes we talked about tonight,
In the general plan, no.
is it in what you submitted to her?
No.
Is it gonna change?
Is it, if we make the changes that we proposed tonight,
all the changes we talked about are fine.
We're good.
Yeah.
We're solid.
Yeah, just
Even
make sure
though
you
we didn't-
understand.
because I don't want tonight to be for naught.
Even
The only thing that
redefining.
DWS has interested is this document, this portion of this element. Everything else that we did up to
That
this
is correct,
point,
yeah.
okay, has to be by law, has to be in there
In the
when you
general plan.
prove it. And you just clarified it and we're fine with everything there. So we're compliant with the law. But the only thing that DWS will look at when they get their general plan when it's submitted is only the moderate income housing.
So you're not done yet.
Okay,
You still get a couple more.
so let me walk
Thank
around.
you.
Randy, based on what Stephen and Brody said, are you okay with the idea of just going with what we've already provided and what they believe they have got approval on?
Yes.
Yes. Sophie,
Yes.
Diane?
Yes, but we would
Yes,
like
but-
to use this for our.
Reporting.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. That,
Be a good
That
baseline
actually-
for.
So there's a few more
That
comments
actually helps
we need to
staff out
continue
quite a
with.
bit.
Diane, you kind of on page 111, you had this comment about completed the June 2023.
Yeah, is that realistic?
It has to be for the simple fact is we have a qualifying application and it has to be done by June.
Okay.
So the consultant has it. He's hoping by end of March to give it to me to take to planning commission in April. Any changes need to be then to you guys in May, have it approved.
Okay.
So it is feasible.
But tight.
They're earning their money. We'll just say that.
Well, that would be a first for everything. How about that?
Diane, on page 125, you asked about the pickleballs.
Yeah.
Just going back to what we originally looked at, this chart, and actually this whole page wasn't even part of the conversation. So that's probably why they didn't update and put pickleball courts on it.
Okay. Is that something that we should or?
I can look at it. I just don't want to hold,
Yeah.
I don't want to hold the plan up.
We don't even know
Right.
where we're at on pickleball.
yeah.
But this is just talking
Seems
about
like we have some concrete
amenities,
donated, but that's
probable,
about the extent of it.
probable cost for amenities in existing parks. Okay.
You okay
If we
with
want to
that?
do pickleball,
Just go ahead.
again,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then the last one was talking about
127?
127 Tiger
Yes.
grants. Again, this page in this section wasn't part of the discussion. I know it's outdated. I can call UTA who got the Tiger grant to find out if those dates have changed.
So all my research says that they're gone, there's nowhere there, and my notes from our last meeting said we were going to omit that because it was out of date. That's what my notes.
And the
said.
challenge I think I have with Tiger, based on my research is it has tendency to be much more railroad oriented.
Right, and this was supposed to be first and last mile for you or UTA to do all within their stations, front runner stations, because they got it from Ogden to Provo area to look at each station and say, okay, what can we do for the first and last mile?
I mean, if that's outdated and irrelevant, I would say scratch it.
Well,
But if you
can I call
update it-
UTA and find out? And if
Yes,
some-
absolutely, because
some of
then
the
we
You
can-
can update it and make it read
Yeah.
current, I'm okay, otherwise I would
I'd
scratch it.
Scrap it if it's still a viable.
Yep, then let's turn it
But if it,
into
if you,
something that shows that.
if
it's viable.
UTA says, no, it's done, it's over, I'll just scrap the
Sounds
paragraph.
good. That's,
Okay.
that's what I would like.
And to your dismay, I'm sorry, we're done.
Anything else, council, on this topic?
God bless all those involved.
So I will make the changes. Dan, I'll sit down with you to make that. I think there was one paragraph or two that we needed to
Uh-huh.
wordsmith and then,
Okay, well, maybe I'll work on the glossary stuff too, and then I'll work on that,
Yeah,
and then we
just-
can get together and,
you know, let's make an appointment. We can get
Okay.
together. I hate to say it, next couple days, so I can modify everything, get it to you on the 7th,
okay,
so we can get this approved.
sounds like a deal.
Okay.
I'll work on that.
That's all I have, Mayor.
You're gonna meet with him, clarify that one, or we
Yep.
feel pretty comfortable with that?
Yeah, we'll work on all of those.
There's
and
a
I'll get
couple
the
things that
glossary.
we were gonna sit down and
Yeah.
Okay, anything else, council? Okay. Matt? Okay, and do I have a motion then to adjourn?
So moved.
I should have just asked him
Joe,
first.
do you wanna-
Joel?
Hey, I'm consistent because it's my favorite motion at sewer board meeting too.
Do I have a second? I'll second, Randy. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, I got one opposed and three.
She said nay, so she's not opposed.
She said she opposed. I Document this stuff.
Just so you
Thank
know,
to
there-
all
we
for
have-
your Efforts.
Chris Collins of the Planning Commission also says nay. He just wants to be there.
I figure there has to be a first for everything.
He knows that 6 of them are like, no, let's get out of here.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Yes, thanks.